again, we sit down and attempt to have another conversation. Maybe the way that I said that was awkward. Attempt too early, and I don't want to double attempt in a sentence. We're going to sit down and have another conversation that we call attempted intelligence. Now, because I made a mistake, and what was it on The Simpsons? Is this safe? It's like, nothing can possibly go wrong. Possibly go wrong. That's the first thing that's ever gone wrong. So I double attempted a sentence. But because there are the possibilities for mistakes in any live, free-flowing conversation, one of the things that happened in the initial conversation that you and I had on the theory of constructed emotion seemed to be surrounding the concept of wakes and their origin. And as I said, in the manner in which I approached it was, I said the idea of a wake seems to me, as somebody who grew up primarily in Canada, or primarily in North York, really a very small place, was that the way that I understood wakes was that they were an Irish tradition. And I said, I don't know what actual Irish people do today, right. But what I've been told is that the tradition of mourning of a wake essentially is supposed to be a celebration of life, supposed to celebrate the person's life, how they lived, positive memories, but also get drunk.
Yes.
That's the way that I get it. Now, you had some ideas that you remember that weren't fully fleshed out, and I had said essentially, we're not necessarily going to check this out right now.
Right.
And in you considering what you had said, you realized that there were some minor details that weren't completely accurate.
Correct. And I wanted to make sure that was clear as well, that as we're attempting to do our intelligence and our intelligent conversations and flesh these things out, that we do make mistakes, but as well, we are kind of looking for our reliability and our validity concepts and just bring those out. But I did go back and check the reliability of my information and
reliability or the
validity of
the what?
Validity.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry.
You sound a little.
Yes, a little bit. Of my information, and I just wanted to make sure that I was giving you the right information, and I realized that giving you partially incorrect information as well as...
I don't know that it was partially incorrect. I think you just maybe focused too much on the lead.
Yes, possibly. But there were just a varying array of unknown diseases at the time, and they did cause people to exhibit behaviors which
is extremely low or undetectable pulse rates, extremely slow respiration, so that it wasn't necessarily visible. So what they did is they made sure that you weren't dead by putting you in a room with a mourner, usually a close intimate. Is that fair?
Yes.
Usually, obviously not always, but somebody was sitting there with you and they were really upset because you were close to them, and then everybody else was outside and they were provided with, was it finger sandwiches and alcohol, or just refreshments?
It was basically just whatever was available at the time, but yes, alcohol and food to pass the time while they were waiting to prove
that you didn't just accidentally wake up.
Yes.
So the idea of the term wake was to provide enough time in case you accidentally woke up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then it's mutated over time to what I've experienced. Now, maybe it's in a different country, it's completely different.
True.
Where it's like, this is what the Irish people do. It's like, again, I don't know what Irish people do now.
Right.
And it's not like all Irish people are the same, or all Irish people come from the same religious tradition, or all Irish people have the same death rituals. Right. That's not what's true.
Right.
There might be something that allows somebody to say, it's Irish. Cool, fair, one, fantastic. But just as with the theory of constructed emotion, there's a category and multiple or a range of expressions that relate to that category. So we turn back to the theory of constructed emotion, an attempt to bring forth some popular cultural references that would show you, or that would not show you, but suggest that an emotional category can have an array of expressions.
Yes.
Right? So to try to show it in places that some people might have seen it. Now, some of our references, or at least maybe my references, might be somewhat obscure, but there might be value if people choose to check in on it and go look at it. Now, the first one that I want to bring up is the movie Norbit.
Okay.
So Norbit was Eddie Murphy doing one of the things that Eddie Murphy does, playing multiple characters in the same movie. So he played Norbit, who's the main character, Norbit's wife, Rasputia, and Mr. Wong. Okay. Now, the beginning of the movie, which I think is the perfect expression of the theory of constructed emotion, or maybe not necessarily the perfect expression, but an emotional response that you wouldn't expect to an event. So Norbit was given up by his parents to an orphanage when he was young. Right. So the beginning of the movie is basically Norbit narrating, and there's a car driving around. Right. It's driving around. He's like, my parents, they couldn't keep me, and they had to give me up. But I can just envision them thinking about the perfect orphanage that had everything that I needed to give me to. Right. So this. And what ends up happening is they're driving around, and there's a Chinese food restaurant, like Wong's Palace, I think is what it's called, and they just throw the baby out. And he's saying, they found where the perfect place was with love, and I know that they couldn't keep me, but they just loved me. And it's like, no, you got given up, man. So in the face of a trauma, his emotional response is
right.
non-standard.
Right.
The other deal is that essentially every time he comes into trauma, he still has a lot of optimism. So he still seems to, the character of Norbit still seems to be able to be positive in the face of negativity. Right. So that doesn't necessarily map perfectly well onto the theory of constructed emotion, but what it does suggest is there's a popular cultural reference that shows non-standard emotional expression culturally.
Right.
So with respect to the concept that in the theory of constructed emotion, emotional expressions may not necessarily be consistent between cultures.
Right.
Within a given culture, or even within a given culture, so within a given culture, in response to an event, a traumatic event, Norbit has optimism. Right. The other one that I remember is Amanda Knox. So Amanda Knox, and I really hope that I'm saying the right name, essentially an young American lady that was in school in Italy, post-secondary school of some sort. I would assume university, but I don't know the Italian education system. So I would assume university. Had been there for a very short period of time, and her roommate got killed.
Okay.
Right? Now, so she ended up, her roommate got killed, but because it was, the roommate, she ended up getting convicted of the murder with, as far as I know, no hard evidence.
Okay.
But when interviewing Amanda Knox, she didn't show a specific type of concern. So she was like, well, yeah, that's bad, but it wasn't me. It's more or less.
Right.
The aftermath of the case over time, right? So it went to a jury, and the jury was looking at Knox and how she responded to the murder, and it just didn't seem like she was being genuine to that, right? Now this is in Italy. This is an American in Italy.
All right.
So the whole idea is that over time, because they realized that the hard evidence didn't add up, and she wasn't where she would have had to be to have committed the murder, there was no motive, that essentially what happened was, being an American in Italy, the type of grief that you're supposed to show, or the behaviors of grief that you're supposed to show for somebody proximate to you being murdered, Amanda Knox didn't show. Well, Amanda Knox didn't really know this person, maybe knew her a little bit. They shared a living space, probably didn't talk all that much, might have been a language barrier, I don't know. But Amanda Knox was like, yeah, it sucks that she's dead, but I mean, shoot, I just wanted to party.
Yeah.
Right, so the idea being that you can be convicted of murder if you don't grieve the right way.
Right.
You don't look like you're in the right kind of grief for your roommate. Nobody asked how long they've been roommates, or maybe they did, but it just didn't, to you and I, let's just say you've known somebody for 2 months, and they get killed. Right? It might mess with you,
right.
But it might be like, well, I didn't really know them that well, and
right.
it's like, it's a real shame that they died.
Yeah.
Now, I'd probably be the real weird one. Like, yeah, probably saw it coming. That young lady was a jerk.
Yeah.
She was messing with a lot of dudes. I didn't ask her no questions, but whatever. I can make up a story on the spot. It has no bearing on the idea. But the idea being that a murder conviction was primarily based on the inconsistent display of emotion between cultures.
Right.
Okay. Now, I more or less put forth the task of you finding some pop culture references, and you had gone through a list and said, like, is this it? Is this it? I'm like, well, kind of. And then you stopped asking. So I'm assuming you found something that you think maps well onto the theory of constructed emotion.
I found an example. It's based on a true story. It's called
Based on a true story?
Based on a true story.
So it is a true story, but it's not the true story of the true story?
Correct.
Nice. But again, pop culture references, so it doesn't have to be real.
Right.
So it's not the true story of a true story. All right, we start there.
Yeah. It's it's called The Bridge of Spies.
Okay.
It's based on an American surveillance pilot who ends up getting captured on enemy soil and gets taken prisoner. And the U.S. government is trying to negotiate with the other country, trying to get him back, and they realize they have a criminal on their side, which they can trade for.
Okay.
And it turns out that he is a spy that's been there for decades doing things, and he's not really a citizen of the U.S., and he's not really a citizen of that country. So there's a whole bunch of legalities that are around that, and a whole bunch of technical, like based on what he's done, crimes, which he can be convicted for. So a lawyer is appointed to him.
Tom Hanks. Now, I've never watched the movie, but you sent me a clip, so I remember some of this.
Yes.
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. I don't actually remember if he is a lawyer, but I remember that he has...
He's the representative that was assigned.
Correct.
If I remember right, he was a public defender, wasn't he?
I think so, yes.
That would be a lawyer.
Right. I remember that he was saying that he was kind of out of the game, so I can't remember if he was actually...
Yeah.
So...
Well, he was a lawyer. He is a lawyer. But he wasn't like a sharp lawyer.
Right.
Is what you're essentially suggesting. Okay.
So he's trying to lay out the possible scenarios to this spy, and he said, really, I'm pretty good at what I do, and there's a good chance that, I can help you, but there's a good chance that you'll stay in prison for the rest of your life, or get the electric chair, or, go back to your country, and all of the results will maybe be unknown. And the spy responds with, okay.
So I remember the clip that you sent me. Okay, so essentially it's like what seems to be the central. I didn't watch the movie, but what seems to be the central joke or the central thing is Tom Hanks puts forth like, these really bad things are probably going to happen.
Yes.
And then the guy goes. Then Tom Hanks goes, "You don't seem surprised." And then
you don't seem worried.
You don't seem worried. And then this spy goes, "Would it help?"
Yes. He's like, if it would help, I'll start worrying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. I won't start worrying, but I'll show worry.
Yeah.
So now this could be the quirk of the individual. So emotions are not consistent within an individual, or between individuals, or between cultures. So the idea is that this is a fish out of water. So in dire situations, the spy is like, well, I don't know, if I seem worried, would it help? Now, but the thing that I like about the clip, at least that you sent to me, was it's not that he's saying I will display emotion or worry if it helps. He's also possibly in a meta way, in a large overarching way, saying, why should I? Would it even help?
Is it going to change my circumstances?
Because you have factual information saying I did these things.
Yes.
I definitely spied. I definitely committed treason. Would me showing that I'm worried help my case? Right? Or or however you want to parse that. I haven't watched the movie, so I don't know kind of the details. But the basic idea is that would it help if I looked worried? Essentially shows that in, again, a possible traumatic situation or a possible dire situation, the guy doesn't have a large emotional reaction, but he's like, well, my culture says you should have a reaction, and it should look like this, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna.
Yeah.
It's going to look how it looks. People having panic attacks. Sometimes it doesn't look like much. They just look quiet.
Yeah.
Right? Or they don't have anything to say. But really inside they're freaking out. Right? So, but that's going to vary individual to individual.
Yes.
I might be way off base, but if somebody really looks panicky, like they're jittery and they're talking fast and whatever, I don't know that that's a panic attack. That might be shock. right? Like there
again,
might be something else. So when somebody looks panicked, that might be, or even when I say looks panicked, it's almost as though there's an underlying assumption of what that looks like, and that when I say that, other people will understand.
I was going to say, this emphasizes the whole range of in the category.
Yeah. So, but the idea of somebody like their respiration rate goes up, maybe they sweat more, maybe, right? Or they might just look really calm and say nothing. But who knows?
Right.
So, did you find any others?
The only other one I found, and I felt that it wasn't as strong, was
Did you feel it wasn't as strong, or did I say it wasn't as strong?
You said that it wasn't as strong, so I felt that it wasn't as strong.
Why follow? Why not make your case, sir?
So it was a Seinfeld clip that I sent you, and it was George trying to convince Jerry to stop being funny around George's new girlfriend.
Okay.
Because George's girlfriend currently thinks that he's funny, and he doesn't want to go down a notch.
Okay.
So he doesn't want to look less in front of Jerry.
Yeah.
So Jerry ends up sounding very depressed and dark, and she ends up being attracted to the darkness of that. But he was attempting to help George in the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because that's a performance, not necessarily an emotional category, right? So the central emotion that starts it all, it might be anxiety. George is anxious that he's going to lose a girl because she's going to think Jerry's funny, right? But so that's not necessarily the expression of emotion, or maybe it is. The anxiety is expressed in a request, as opposed to increased respiration, decreased cognitive capacity. It's an actual clear strategic thing where I'm anxious that I'm going to lose this girl because she thinks I'm funny, but you're funny, right? So I don't want her to, if she meets you, don't be funny, right? So the anxiety is expressed, and this is where again, this is why I say, why did you just listen to me? Why didn't you just make your case? Because within that, it's the anxiety that George is feeling with respect to this new relationship where he believes the girl thinks he's funny, so he could lose her if
then
Jerry's
he calmly,
funny.
Logically requests.
So the anxiety comes out as calm and logical. Right. So that's actually interesting. Where that's what I say. Did you actually think it wasn't a good one? Because there's something there that actually shows a variation on expression of anxiety. It's a calm, clear, logical, strategic request for a change in behavior in somebody else.
Fair enough.
Right? Because he still wants to keep being funny.
Right.
But he's anxious about Jerry. Right. So that's actually interesting. Right. So hopefully some of that has provided places that people can look to see variations in emotional expression, or a category of emotion and variations in expression in popular culture. Right. Now, whether or not you look for it, whether or not you like it, not up to us. But the idea is to try to further flesh out the concept of the theory of constructed emotion, whereby you will have a category of emotion, a variety of expressions for that category of emotion. Now, that said, quite often it's pretty stable. It is generally stable within a person, between people, and between cultures. However, there are circumstances whereby it is not, the expression is not stable within the individual, between individuals, and between cultures, which is why it becomes tricky to understand emotion or predict emotion based on an external expression, either a facial expression, autonomic expression, be it perspiration, respiration, skin conductance, or neural circuit. So, anything to add on?
Other than that, no, it's just those details.
You always say other than that, no, just so you do have something to add on.
I do. It's
goddamn habits.
I need to take those words to take the moment to process.
Okay, we'll say make a new one.
I'll make a new one next time. But
I don't know.
it's just the details and what you said. I just want to emphasize that it's very much that we can't. It's complicated in the sense that we can't use those the signals, the symbols, and those things that we recognize as
the standard expectation.
The standard expectation of emotion.
Emotional expression.
Emotional expression. Yes, that's better.
I
As
think so.
I actually think so.
Well, that's why.
But the emotional expression, that those things that we were expecting, for recognizing those emotions, because between individuals, between cultures, it can change. And it
Okay.
can vary.
Or there's a variety. Expect
Right.
a variety.
Right.
So the idea is that you
not
can
one thing.
use the standard expectation, and it will usually work reasonably well. However, that's because it usually works really well. It's also how you get tricked.
Yes.
So people say they show the right expression of the right emotion at the right time, and you give them what they want.
Right.
Right. So because there is a norm, there is a middle of the road expression for a given emotional category. That's what people might use to mess with you. Okay. So you can use it. You'll often be right because there's a variation or a variety of expressions of an emotional category, but there is still a cluster.
Well, offense
pretty
and
common.
defense. So I mean,
offense and defense.
well, it can be used against.
But everything can.
I understand.
The idea, sorry, maybe sorry. But the idea is that if somebody is showing the expected thing, I get more worried.
Oh.
Because I'm like, wait a minute, you're responding exactly how you're supposed to.
Exactly.
That's it. And if I happen to know you as an individual, and I know that you have a variety of expressions with respect to either an emotional category or a traumatic event,
Right.
And it varies, but you're doing exactly what's expected of you, I'm like, I feel like you're doing this for somebody else. That's what makes me curious.
Yeah.
I might accidentally have tuned into the variety earlier in life,
Okay.
because when I see something that is standard and expected, I'm like, yeah, don't believe you.
Right.
Me as an individual, maybe not everybody else. And again, I'm going to tell you that it's entirely accidental, right? But the idea is that I expect things to be of a variety,
Right.
or not of a variety, a range.
Yes.
Not always the same. I expect you to grieve differently time to time, like event to event.
Right.
Maybe I don't expect you to grieve. I'm like, how about you just tell me how you feel? Instead of me guessing and then making you cry for a year because that's what a culture expects. Like, no, let's not do that. So there is a fairly tight cluster of expressions under an emotional category, but there is variation. There are outliers.
Right.
Expect them all. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Fair enough. So another conversation, and we continue these as we go, finding interesting topics for us. Maybe more for me, because I'm the one that commonly looks for all these topics. But it's partially because of the things that I'm learning over time for varying reasons. If you learn something, come on, goddamn it, share it, make me smarter. Right? Like I feel smart sometimes, but it doesn't mean I am. So whatever. Share some shit.
Okay.
Well, now I feel like I'm being like aggressive. Yeah.
Aggressive?
Maybe intellectually aggressive.
Okay.
Like, I'm not like yelling at you or anything.
Striving to be,
Yeah.
better and attempt more intelligence.
Yeah. Find some stuff. Share it.